15 years ago, in 2008, when Dead Space released, I decided to pick it up because I thought I was hot shit. I was like, man, I played Nazi zombies. I'm not scared of some space game. And then this happened. Then, I turned the game off and quickly went back to Nazi zombies. After that, Dead Space became a dead space where I put my video games. But that was old me. I was younger then. I was scared of jump scares and loud noises. Now, things are a little different. Now I'm scared of other things, like atmosphere and good writing. Seeing that it was the next game on my review list, I thought, now it's time to conquer it. Now, I'm not a big fan of sci-fi. I didn't like Mass Effect, and I've never watched a Star Wars movie, so if a game or anything takes place in the future, I pretty much lose interest right away. So I came into Dead Space with really low expectations because I thought that was going to be a really big obstacle to get over. I was happy to find out that that is not the case with Dead Space. I think because of its futuristic setting, it actually is a really unique approach to the survival horror game genre. And because of it, I think I'm actually more inclined to try these like sci-fi games or movies or whatever that I didn't like at first, because I really did enjoy it. Now, I want to just give a rundown of the synopsis of Dead Space for anyone who's never heard of the series. This game is a survival horror game where you play as a space engineer named Isaac Clarke, and he's tasked on a team to go figure out what's going on this space station called the Ishimura. Upon the first couple minutes of gameplay, when you're on the Ishimura, you quickly discover that the ship has been overrun by these creatures called necromorphs. Now, the biggest contribution to the uniqueness of Dead Space is really in its gameplay. I feel like this game as a whole is a perfect example of challenging the norm. In every way possible, it kind of deviates from what normal survival horror experiences are like, and I absolutely love that. I think it really places the game in a league of its own. Combat-wise, there are so many different ways to kill enemies. I came in expecting Resident Evil, where you were shooting zombies in the head and killing them, and I left with more of like BioShock, where there's a bunch of different routes you can take and a bunch of different avenues you can take to kind of kill these enemies. There are guns or mining tools, they are technically, that you can use to kill enemies, and it's not just simply shooting in the head like I had mentioned before in Resident Evil. You have to shoot their limbs off in this game, which is really unique. In every game ever, in every shooter ever that ever existed, shooting in the head is always the best spot. But in Dead Space, as I said before, it challenges the norm. You don't shoot in the head. You shoot the limbs off. You shoot the little glowing sac on certain parts of the enemies. You shoot little tendrils that come out of the little deformed necromorph babies. This game is disgusting. There are also many stage hazards that you can use to kind of kill enemies and makes you kind of think outside the box and how to approach a situation. Just be careful, because obviously these stage hazards can be used against you. Okay. Gotta watch the fire. Gotta be more careful. That's fine. No harm, no foul. Let's get into this. You also can use melee, which is good, which is crazy that it's good. In every survival horror game ever, melee sucks. I think other than like Resident Evil 4, the original, where you can use the knife to kind of cheese enemies as they're climbing the ladder, that is the only survival horror game where melee is good. Any other survival horror game, the melee is absolutely terrible unless you get like a one-time use item that you can kill one enemy with. In this game, melee is pretty much the bread and butter of your combat. You can shoot enemies' legs off to be able to stomp them to death. You can freeze them in stasis to be able to punch them to death. There are so many applications that you can use the melee for in the game that honestly it makes it such a reliable option. The melee comes in clutch when you're running low on ammo or just want to preserve it because you know a boss fight is coming up. And that's really the amazing part of the melee. There's also a magic type aspect of the game where you have two little features where you can use telekinesis, which is self-explanatory, and stasis, which kind of freezes enemies and makes them move super slow so you can really take advantage of them. Oh, that sounds bad. All of these features combined, even with all of that cool stuff, I was kind of like, okay, you know, the combat is cool, it's unique, but it really wasn't selling me yet. And then I realized that telekinesis didn't cost mana. Whew. That changed things. That made the combat literally go from like a 7 to an 11. The telekinesis is by far the best part of the entire game. Once I realized that telekinesis didn't cost energy, it was like the scene in Kingsman. Freebird was playing. I was using explosive canisters to kill enemies. I was using their own limbs against them. I was throwing coffee cups. I was going crazy. The telekinesis is one of the best features and well-implemented cases of telekinesis I've ever seen in a video game. It really, really made it that much better. There really is no downside to using the telekinesis, aside from the fact that it made me a lazy piece of shit. Like, every item in the distance, I didn't walk over to get it, I'd snap and it'd come to me, which is wonderful. I don't want to go get items. That's terrible. This is 2023. I want to be pampered. I think every single game should have its own in-universe DoorDash system where I can just bring every item to me. Now, too much of a good thing is bad. I do have a complaint with the telekinesis, not necessarily in how it's used, but how it's implemented. When you have telekinesis in the game, there has to be things that you can telekinese. So, what Dead Space does is it has various objects all around the board so that you can use. Now, some of them are way more useful than others, which is fine. You have explosive canisters, which are probably the best thing. You have spears that you can use as kind of like harpoons to pin enemies. You can also use their own body parts against them. So if an enemy has an explosive arm, let's say, you can rip that off and use it to kill another one. But the issue is that the game also adds a whole bunch of other items that you can use, which causes certain areas to be completely littered with stuff. So if you're in a specific room and there's a fight and the area is littered with random stuff that you don't necessarily want to pick up, it could be hard to kind of pick up the right thing. Let's say you're trying to pick up a spear and you accidentally pick up not a spear. That could make or break the fight, and you can die because of it. Also, another big complaint I have with the gameplay is the map in its entirety. I didn't really fully understand how to use the map until like midway through the game, which is kind of just because I'm stupid. But one of the biggest complaints I have is that there's no marker system. I think in every single video game ever, there should be some type of map marker system so you can mark things that you want to return to. In Dead Space, there is security clearance, which kind of works as like a key to be able to like open up different lockers to get more resources and stuff. But when you stumble across these lockers and you don't have the proper security clearance, you have to leave it. You have to come back later. But unlike the security clearance doors, you can't mark the lockers, so you have no idea where they are. And like, I'm not going to look up a YouTube video to find them all, because I'll go there and it's for like 3 plasma cutter bullets, and no thank you. I'd mentioned some of the enemy design before, and the enemy design in this game is probably also one of its best features. The enemies feel so different. They all require a different way to approach them, which really makes every single tool you pick up so useful. I think the only enemy I didn't enjoy fully was the annoying vine enemies that spit out little pods that create a tendril that shoots at you. The first couple times I fought those, man, they were annoying. But then I started using different weapons against them, and they became easy. It wasn't even a second thought. I immediately killed them. Piggybacking off of the enemy design, the boss fights are also very unique and fun. I'm a big Zelda fan, so if the boss has glowing spots on it that tells you, hey, shoot me here, it's very engaging to me. But also, on top of that, I feel like in a lot of survival horror games, the bosses are kind of used to be like a bullet sponge to kind of like level you out. Dead Space doesn't really do that. Dead Space does not take away your fighting chance from you. You constantly have resources to use. You constantly have ways to conserve ammo, and even in the boss fights, they'll also have either creatures you can kill to pick up more ammo, or boxes to destroy, or just environmental hazards that you can use to your advantage. It really never takes away the fight from you, which I think is another deviation from the norm. In so many games, you have the main character loses their gun, or you play a different character where you're helpless now, or the entire game, and like Outlast, you have no way of fighting. In this game, it never does that. You always have a way to fight, and it still is scarier than 90% of the survival horror games that I've played out there. And I think the reason it's so scary is because Dead Space, instead of the cheap jump scares that normal survival horror games have, no, Dead Space still has them, but instead of those, it also has the atmosphere aspect that you'd expect from BioShock. You have the general basis of being on a ship that has completely been overrun by these necromorph creatures is completely terrifying in and of its own right.
Where is everybody? Half the ship must have heard that landing.
The game has these atmospheric directions that really add to how scary it is. For instance, you never really truly feel alone in Dead Space. There's always noises happening, there's whispers going on throughout the entire game. You'll be walking down a hallway and then a radiator will start just making a loud noise. You never feel like you're alone, and you wish that you were alone, because most of the time you are not alone. And it's the least comforting thing I think about this game. Also, the game does a great job of immersing you in the world. There is no heads-up display. Your health and energy are displayed on Isaac's back. When you are damaged enough, Isaac's voice will change when talking to characters. Instead of talking normally, he'll like grunt and kind of struggle to get the words out.
The safeties are still on. I need to restore gravity before we can load it.
There are also certain parts in the game where you are in a vacuum and the game cuts out all of the audio, and the only thing you can hear is the ominous beeps of Isaac's oxygen meter depleting. Now, in my entire playthrough of the game, I never actually ran out of oxygen once, because they do give you a really good amount, but this little detail makes for such a tense and anxiety-inducing time. Also, story-wise, there's a part in the game where an antagonist freezes you in stasis. And I think it would be simple for the game to make this a cutscene, where the character, gets frozen and then they have their dialogue, or at least the character that froze Isaac has his dialogue. But instead, in this game, it lets you move the camera, which I feel like it's such a silly thing, but that direction that the game goes in, allowing you to move the camera, really makes you feel like you are being frozen. And I really wanted to point this out because I think it's such a good idea. Now, the wonderful thing about Dead Space is that the game is able to be this scary, but it's still fun. Like, it doesn't have a lot of, annoyances that really are game-breaking. Like, I think of my last review of Resident Evil 4, where I was complaining about, the save spots and having to redo parts of the game and everything. This game doesn't really have that. There are 1,000 save stations. Literally, there are points where you will do a room, go through a hallway, and in that next room, there's another save station. And I think it's awesome. I think it's great. I think that the lack of being able to save your game doesn't really add to the overall experience of a survival horror game, really at all. I think Dead Space does a really good job of implementing enough save stations throughout the experience. On top of that, Dead Space is aware of one thing that I think a lot of survival horror games fail to kind of hit the mark on. Dead Space knows that it is a video game. And what I mean by that is that, yeah, most of the game is super serious and the tone is very dark and ominous, but there are parts where you are playing basketball. You are playing gravity basketball, and it's super goofy, or you'll do a shooting range, and it kind of gives you a little break from the dread of the situation you're in. It really doesn't take away from the scariness of the game, and I think that's really Awesome. Now, I would like to end by highlighting one of my favorite aspects of Dead Space, which is its uniqueness compared to other games in its genre. When you pick up Resident Evil 7, let's say, you're playing Ethan, who is an inexperienced individual. He has no military training, as far as I remember, and he's kind of thrown into this situation with kind of, no wits about him. But the gamer playing Ethan has an understanding of, let's say, a shotgun when he picks it up. He knows what a shotgun does. That is not the case in Dead Space. First of all, you are playing an inexperienced individual. Isaac Clarke is an engineer. He's by no means military trained, which is amazing. Because as the player, when you pick up a force gun, you also don't know what that is. You really just have no clue what these tools you're picking up are actually capable of, which kind of creates this degree of inexperience and naiveness that you kind of have to figure stuff out and figure out what they do and figure out what the best scenario to use them in is. And that's kind of terrifying in and of its own right, because in those survival horror games, when you pick up a shotgun, you go, oh, okay, I'm going to be better at close range combat. You have no idea what the guns do in Dead Space, so you don't know where your strengths are when you pick up a new weapon. That's really something that other games in the genre fail to capture. I'm definitely in kind of like a horror kick right now, maybe because my friends keep recommending horror games to me and I keep playing them, or just because it's that time of the year. But I really enjoyed Dead Space. I'm absolutely going to play the next two. I think there's three. But I might wait for them to remaster 2 and 3, because I did play the remake, so we'll see. But overall, definitely enjoyed the experience and would recommend it to anybody who likes survival horror. And that's about all the thoughts I have about Dead Space. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more, please like the video and subscribe.